Okay, we're continuing our Mises over here with Yeshua ben Nun, Yeshua Parak Aleph Pasuk Yud Ches, continuing the discussion of Yeshua had a melech and taking it to the next level. Okay, just to wrap up about if Yeshua had a melech or not, just a couple of marmakaimis, nothing major, just a few points, a few marmakaimis and things to think about. Bamidbar Rabba Chaf Chaf. Amaloi Balak said to Bilam, Hoil va'incha yochel liga behen, mipnei Moshe meshamshan. This that you're not able to touch Klal Yisrael because Moshe is the Rebbe. Re'eza omin me'acharav ma'yiyah. See the person who's standing behind Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning who's the next leader after Moshe Rabbeinu passes on. Amalei, so Bilam says, Afu kasha kamoisai, utruas melech boy. He's just as difficult to overcome like Moshe, Utruas Melech by. That's Utruas Melech that Bilam said. So you have the medrash over there also that it's very clear that Balak and Bilam were saying clearly that the Yeshua ben Nun is the antithesis to is a Melech. Now what's interesting is that in a certain oifen, Yeshua ben Nun was the antithesis to Bilam and Balak. Why is that? Because he sent, at the beginning of Parak Beis will see Mirz Hashem, that he sent Kalev and Pinchas to Rachav, Ve'yishlach shnayim anashim meraglim and Ashitim. Why does the pasuk mention that they were sent from Shittim? Who did he send? Pinchas. Pinchas was the one that took care of Zimri and Cosby. So he went to be Masak in the Chet of Meraglim. He went to be Masak in the Chet of Baal Pe'ar. And there was a lot of different things that they went to be masakin, but Bekitzer al Kalpanim, that was that. Okay, that's a Truas Melech Bay is said in reference to Yeshua as well. Now we have a Chuvas Divrei Malkiel, which I think we'll get back to later also. It's in Chelik Hey Siman Ayin. Divrei Malkiel Stamazay, it's a fascinating set of Chuvas, tons of Gitta Zachen, very, very rich, tons of Gitta Zachen over there. He writes like this: She'ein hasrara mikayach haTorah. The appointment of Yeshua of his wasn't Mikayach HaTorah. The idea is over here that this Srara, that this appointment of being the official leader of Klal Yisrael, she'ein hasrara Mikayach HaTorah, it doesn't come from the Kayach HaTorah. Rak hamamunah lohiro kadayim mikri minui habot Mikayach HaTorah. Only somebody who is going to have a position, have a shtela, so to speak, that's going to be giving, forwarding Torah, that's going to be coming with Koyach Torah. Like we explained earlier in Pasuk Zayin. This is not like the Igros Moshe, because Rav Moshe writes in a tshuva that the reason why Yeshua Taka became the leader of Klal Yisrael is because of his Gadlus B'Torah. But now, we explained Rabbeinu Bechari not so long ago that the idea of these battles that Klal Yisrael was fighting was only going to be fought in Mikayach HaTorah. The one we see that most by, the one that it's boilet mostly by, or Fakert, the one that had to do it in this Eifen more than anybody else was Yeshua ben Nun. So I'm not sure exactly how to understand the different Malkiel. It's still bothersome to me. I don't know. I have to think about it. I don't have it clear yet. But Al Kapanim, there may be a concept on a much more simple level that his job was to be the leader of Klal Yisrael. Now, this doesn't stem with a lot of other things also, because there's a Brisker Rav that we spoke that he had the Maila of, there's a Rambam that says that he was the Rosh Sanhedrin. He's Rosh Sanhedrin. The Rambam says in the Hakdama that to the Yad HaChazaka, that he was a big part of the Messiah HaTorah. Moshe Kibul Torah Misina Messiah Yeshua. So maybe the reason why he got the original job wasn't because of his Gadlus B'Torah, but that was because he was the greatest Talmud of Moshe Rabbeinu, like we spoke so many times. Again, I'm not sure. We'll have to leave this for now, maybe get back to it at a different time. Okay. Now, we have another interesting Nakuda that is in the Sefer Hagois Kvoid Malachim. It brings from Sefer Hanitzachon, from Rabbeinu Lipman Milhuisen. Don't ask me who this is. We'll get to it at a different time. That he writes over there like this: V'loy oid, ela hamorid b'reish Yisrael afim loy nimshach l'malchus chayav misa. somebody who rebels against the leader of Klal Yisrael, even if he's not anointed and appointed as Melech, is still Chayav Misa. Why? He's standing in place of the king, even though he's not the actual king. Just like the pasuk says, by Yeshua, that anybody who rebels against you, or anything that you say, is going to be Mechuyev Misa. And Yeshua was not Nimshach L'Malchus. And this was the Milchama between Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, and David, that even though both of them were tzaddikim and gemurim, David HaMelech was Nimshach L'Malchus. So David held that anybody who, even if maybe in a certain sense they were roy to be the king from Beis Shaul, but Al Kol Panim, David held that David and everybody else that went with him held that the Beis Shaul were considered Maradim HaMalchus, which is a whole separate shmooze, which we'll get to, because there were really two stages, maybe a little bit more than that, but there are two basic components of David HaMelech's Malchus with the Gevisa timeline, as the Gemara in Megillah, and the Yudalid speaks out, that Abigail told him that Adayin Layotza Tivach Ba'olam, you're still not known yet to be the king. So what's the difference? So if you're going to say, oh, Yena guy is married by Malchus, maybe he was, but you don't have a right to kill him, to make such a big rash about it, because no one even knows that you're the king. You're some quiet guy who has a shtibel with 10 people. You're not a Greiser Rebbe with thousands of Chassidim. Eventually, once the Malchus was established, and we'll see that this is what Shaul's downfall came from, because he didn't believe in his Malchus. He didn't believe in his Malchus, which we'll get to, but that was the, and then once it was Yatza Tivacha Ba'olam, then you have a right to start punishing people that are going to be Baruch B'Malchus. Okay, that's another Nakuda. Now, another thing we could say, L'chaira, that is very much totally, this that Yeshua was a king or not a king, would be very much totally in if Moshe Rabbeinu had the din of a melech, which we spoke, from the Gemara Zvachim and the Sefer HaMikneh in Kedushin, and it's a never pashut l'chayra that he had a din of a melech, but like the pratim of the Signayne Malchus, the Genune Malchus, of did he, that it's aser to Ulurkav al Susai, wasn't shaykh by him, because they believed in Moshe Rabbeinu because he was a shlich from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. Ve'aminu b'Hashem of Moshe Avdai. And as we spoke from the Pachid Yitzchak and others, that Yeshua, everything that Yeshua had was totally geboit on the Metzias of whatever Moshe Rabbeinu was. So Yeshua had a din of a melech, also without a minui, also without an appointment of being a king. But it was the Kabbalah Sa'am Aleim, that's really enough to be a king. It was just the mere fact that this is what Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves, right? Let's say a Gadol B'Yisrael, Klal Yisrael has good taste, so they pick who the Gedolim are. We don't vote for Gedolim. We don't, and many times, the person is a little more controversially, so it's not so simple that people, if he's not accepted, he's not accepted. It's not, and it's obviously Min HaShamayim, because that's the Gemara says that in a few places that every shtela that a person has, even as a janitor, that's also Min HaShamayim also. Now, the idea is like this: why is it so severe? So punish him. Why is it so severe that Kol Ish Asher Yamras Picha Yumas? So it's a double pashat. We spoke about this previously, and we'll get back to it again and again. They're entering into Eretz Canaan that was full with Kol Mini Avodah Zarah and Tumah. And anybody who's not being busy with the stuff that Klal Yisrael is busy with, meaning anybody that's doing his own thing, it's a great michshel that he could fall into Avodah Zarah and end up being Chayav Misa. And you're always going to blame the leadership for it. You're going to say, oh, well, he didn't have a good Rebbe. Oh, well, no one taught him. No one knew. So if we make a very strong statement before we go into Eretz Yisrael, saying that this place is full of Avodah Zarah, the responsibility upon every Yid is that he has to make sure not to do Avodah Zarah. How do we do that? Listen to Yeshua ben Nun. By listening to Yeshua ben Nun, we will work to eradicate all the Avodah Zarah that we have. So a person who doesn't listen to Yeshua ben Nun, it's very, very likely that he'll end up falling into the trap of Avodah Zarah and end up being Chayav Misa because of the Avodah Zarah that he's doing. So therefore, there was an azhara, there was a warning that anybody who doesn't listen to what Yeshua says is Mechuyev Misa. Because his whole Metzias and all his tzivuyim were all gebayt on the fact that they were going into Eretz Yisrael, and they had to separate themselves from the Umas, the 7 nations that were there when they were coming into Israel. Also, Bechlal, the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva, let's get to see it inside. Let's see if we can pull it out real quick. About the person who's Parish Min HaTzibur. So saying must speak in B'yadei Lasis Tshuva. The person who does that, the Torah doesn't like him. He's not Mishtata B'tzarasa Shal Tzibur. Let's just read the Rambam real quick. I have to find it. Hilchos Tshuva. Okay, there are 24 things that are ma'akiv the tshuva. Okay, this would be in Perek Daled of one second. Sorry. I think it would be in Perek Gimel. One minute. A parsha midarke hatzibur. This would be Perek Gimel. Halacha Yud Aleph. HaParish midarke tzibur. Somebody who separates himself from the tzibur, afal pish le'avar averis, even if he doesn't do anything wrong. Ela nivdel me'adas Yisrael. He separates himself from the congregation of Israel. Ve'eni oiseh mitzvahs bechlala, and doesn't do the mitzvahs together with them. V'le nichnas b'tzaroson. He doesn't share in their pain. And doesn't fast when they're fasting. Yeah, he's heilig bedarke ke'echad migoyei ha'aretz. Yeah, and it's as if he doesn't have a chelik in Olam Haba. Why is Rambam sticking that he's heilig ke'echad migoyei ha'aretz? Because by the goyim, they don't have a cohesive group. There's no cohesion over there. So you do whatever you want. But a yid, it has to be mishnata b'tzarasa shal Yisrael. I would say that maybe we can feed this little vertel that we're saying over here, that it's a nice diuk in the Rambam. That the reason is he's heilig ke'echad migoyei ha'aretz, because like we're saying over here, if a person falls out of here, he's going to be very, very quick to fall into the trap of Avodah Zarah. So a person has to be extra careful, especially when they're going into this new country, and there's going to be a lot of fighting all around, that he has to follow what Yeshua says, to have a Rebbe, and the Torah will keep him in check of what he has to do. Okay, there's another shmooze, which we're not going to get into in all its detail, which we mentioned in passing, but the Chemdas Yisrael, that's the Kli Chemda, wrote a Gavaldige Sefer called Chemdas Yisrael, which goes through different mitzvahs, and has fascinating discussions there, which we should definitely do a series of shiurim on that Sefer. So he writes that Yeshua didn't have a melech for everything, because we don't find that he was nimshach b'shem HaMishcha. And the Minchas Chinuch is ready ma'ir on this in Mitzvah Tarfet Yud Beis. Now, there are those that are ma'ira that we find by many of the Malachei Yisrael that they didn't have Shem HaMishcha either, like the Gemara says in Krisis on Daf Zayin, but they still had a din of a melech for everything, like the Gemara says in Haris and Daf Yud Aleph, that the Malachei Yisrael have a din of a nasi, and they're chayiv in the Sar, like a Kasher Nasi Yechta. And we even find by Shaul HaMelech that he didn't have Shem HaMishcha, like it's written in Chuvas Ramami Panus and Kuf Beis. But everyone agrees that Shaul had a din melech and was a melech for in every which way possible. But Rashi says in Krisis on Navav that clearly that Shaul was nimshach b'Shem HaMishcha, and their Barbanel speaks about this by Arichas in his Hakdama to Sefer Yeshua, which is his Hakdama, meaning the Hakdama to Nevi'im Bechlal. Now, we mentioned the Mechilta in the Parshas Peshalach that it says V'simba Ozne Yeshua Magid Sheba Oiseh Hayom Nimshach, and Ba'oiseh Hayom, that day he was Nimshach to be Pashtas. It means he was Nimshach to be a Melech. But let's take one of the psukim that we're constantly getting back to is by Yemra Hashem al Moshe Ksev Zikarim B'Sefer B'Simba Oznei Yeshua. What does the Rashbam say over here at the end of Parshas B'Shalach? Sheyimlech Aleya. So you should put it in the Oznei Yeshua that he should be the Melech over them. The Yekayim Mitzvos Lumchetz Hashem Amalek. He should be Mekayim Mitzvos to destroy Amalek. So Rashbam is going very clear that by this point he had Mashiach to become a Melech. And it's a big shmooze over here, but there's the Aruch HaShulchan HaAsid in Hilchos Malachim Siman Ayin Aleph says he's mesupik if Yeshua was nimshach b'shem and Mishcha, and this is what he says. V'yesh l'Ayin Lama loy matzinu shemashach Moshe liYeshua v'Kadosh Baruch Hu lo tziveu rak v'samachtas yodcha alav. Why is it that we don't find that Moshe gave Mashiach to Yeshua ben Nun with Shem and Mishcha, and Hashem wasn't mitzaveh him only v'samachtas yodcha alav? V'ulai mipnei shlehinichi Yerusha l'zarei. Maybe because he didn't have a continuation of his children. Maybe that's why he wasn't nimshach, which is an odd thing be'etzem, but because the Gemara does talk that if a melech's son is the melech, then he doesn't need Mashiach, unless there's some ma'arin, like we find by Shlomo, and like that. And as we spoke before, that Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua, even though they were actual kings, but they weren't noig like kings. So it's teaches. So it says the Simba Yeshua Magish Nimshach Yeshua. That day Yeshua was Nimshach. Now there are those that learn that this Mashiach does not mean Mashiach to be a Melech with Shem and Mishcha. Or if you want to ask in a much more basic question, you'll ask that Shem and Mishcha wasn't invented yet. So how could you say that it's? How could you say that he was Nimshach B'Shem and Mishcha? It's not a question, because they could have had something else. They could have used anything. Could have used any type of oil. So V'sepis that it had to be Dafka Shem and Mishcha. If you take a look in the Drasha Saran, by the way, for this Ha'ara you have to look in Reb David Soloveitchik on Chumash. He has a big arichas about that. But if you take a look in the Drasha Saran in Drush Yud Aleph, he writes Tachlis Mine Hamelech V'Asheftim. That the job of a king, the purpose of a king and the judges, is to be able to judge the nation a proper mishpat. When there's no king, when there's no king, the shofet, the judges, whoever the leaders are, has the power of a shofet and has the power of a melech. And the same way that Yeshua had the power to kill somebody that didn't listen to him, just like when the pasuk says V'Yibishur Melech, it's a remes to Moshe Rabbeinu. It says before in the Ran that Moshe and Yeshua were not kings b'dina melucha, but they were shoftim, and b'zman shei shofet, and there's no melech. So then the shofet also says it has certain milas, a certain zachin of a melech. But I'll call upon him. That's that. Now, one of the things that we have to also mention, just more or less a hakdama to the coming shiurim about Merida Malchus and the Rambams and all the Geshmak Alamdas that we're going to see soon, is the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs, Mitzvah Sasei, Mitzvah Sasei Kuf Ayin Gimel. We'll just read it inside and we'll touch it. Limnais Melech, to appoint a king. Shenemar Soim Tasam Alecha Melech. The pasuk says you should place a king upon yourself. He shetzivanu limnais Aleinu Melech mi Yisrael. The mitzvah is to appoint a king on us who's going to rule over Klal Yisrael. Yikabetz kolu moisenu. He'll gather together our entire nation. V'yan higenu, and he will lead us. V'u amar yisbarach. In this way, the Torah says, "Sayim tasam alecha melech." That's what it means. That's what he'll do. V'akadam lanu l'shayna b'sifri, and the sifri was already preceded us with this lashon that says shalosh mitzvahs and tztavi Yisrael b'chnisasam la'aretz. There were 3 mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael were commanded when they come into Eretz Yisrael. It's brought in the Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Chafam at Beis. Limnais lahem melech, to appoint a king for them. Livnais lahem beis hamechira, to build a beis hamikdash. Ulahachru zarish al Amalek, and to destroy the descendants of Amalek. V'lashon Sifri Gamkein Same Tasam Alecha Melech Mitzvah Sasei. The Sifri also says that the mitzvah Same Tasam Alecha Melech is also a mitzvah Sasei. Above Ferish, and it's clear over there. She'amru Same Tasam Alecha Melech Shetehei Masei Alecha, that every person in Klal Yisrael is mechuyev to fear to have a certain fear and to be in awe of the king. And that you have to go out of your way to give him kavod and gedula, and to give him the utmost respect, to the extent that there is nobody that you'll respect greater than, you give more respect to than him. It's a fascinating thing that the Rambam says, that the gedula and the kavod that you'll give the melech should be even greater than the madreg of a navi. Mishar hanavim sheyeh b'dayrei, especially from the other Nevi'im that will be in his generation. Which is very interesting, because if you take a look at the Gemara Brachos on Daf Yud, the Gemara brings a shaila that Chizkiah HaMelech was sick, and he wanted Yeshaya Navi to come visit him. So Hashem orchestrated a whole situation over there, but the need over there is that who has to go to who? Does the Navi go to the Melech, or does the Melech go to the Navi? The Rambam seems to say pretty clearly over here that there is no one greater than the Melech. Now Chizkiah was a phenomenal Melech with tremendous kaiches and tremendous milos, as Hashem will talk. But the idea is that it was over there was a shaila, maybe because Yeshaya was much older than him. But al kol panim, there was a shaila there, who has to be mechaber who. And it ended up that Hashem made it that Chizkiah Melech will get sick and Yeshaya will come to Mabakar Chayla. But the Rambam is saying very clear over here that the mile of a king is greater than the Nevi'im. Meaning the cover they have to give him is greater than the Nevi'im. Ubebir Amru, Melech Kadam Navi. And it's clear in Chazal, they say that a Melech comes before a Navi. Because man sheyetzav HaMelech tzivoy, shelo yiyeh soiser mitzvah min HaTorah, hine anachnu chayavim l'shmaya mitzvasai. And any command that the king gives, as long as it doesn't contradict or go against the mitzvah of the Torah, we're obligated to listen to him. Somebody who is over on the mitzvahs HaMelech, and won't listen to him, it's mutter for the Melech to kill him however he wants. Like our forefathers said about themselves. Right? This is also a good taich in the pasuk from the Rambam. Kol isha sheyamra es picha, you must. You must, right? Because it's not the whole pasuk, but anybody who will rebel against what Yeshua said is going to die. And anybody who rebels against the king, doesn't matter who he is, his blood is mutter for the king to take. Shehukam al pi Torah, because this king was established al pi Torah, and this is what the Torah says. And the kvar is bar mishpatei mitzazu kulam b'sheni misanhedrin v'rishayin mikrisus v'zayin misaita, and all the mishpatei mitzazu, all the discussions about these mitzvahs are discussed in the second parak of Sanhedrin, the first parak of Krisus, and the seventh parak in Saita. It's interesting that the Rambam says Hine moto lemelech laharga b'chalin in sheyirtza, as we see in the Rambam in Hilchos B'lachim parak Gimel halacha ches, very clearly that the idea is over there also that the Melech could only kill B'sayif. But again, we'll see Mirz Hashem that there's a lot to that also. It's not so pashut, and it's very much totally in what the din is. Meaning, because it would sound like from here that, just like think about just like a goyal adam, if he sees a person, he's allowed to just go and kill him. So it sounds like the Melech, if he sees that somebody's being murdered b'malchus, he's allowed to just go and kill him. It's damehut aloi. So it's very interesting things. It's not the sense that he's mechuyev misa, like somebody who was born arayish or somebody who was eved of a desara. It sounds like damehut aloi, same way like a goyal adam is allowed to kill somebody else. Okay, it looks like we'll be stopping over here for now.